So what do you do when your government asks you to support something you believe is deeply, fundamentally wrong? It's a question that really cuts to the core of what it means to be a citizen. Today we're going to dig into two of the most important essays in American history that tackle this exact problem, asking a question that's absolutely timeless. What is our duty when our own conscience clashes with the state?
All right, let's just dive right in with one of the most famous and maybe most misunderstood lines in American political thought. This is from Henry David Thoreau. But here's the thing, this powerful idea, it doesn't actually start with an act of rebellion. It starts with something much deeper, a radical reimagining of what it even means to be an individual.
And to really get that, you've got to go back a bit, to the philosopher who laid all the groundwork for this, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Back in 1837, he gave a speech that was basically an intellectual declaration of independence for the American mind.
So Emerson looks around at society, and he sees this huge problem. He argues that people aren't whole anymore. Society, he says, is chopping them up into little pieces, into specialists. He even calls them monsters, like a good finger or a good neck, but never a complete man. You're not a person who happens to be a farmer, you're just the farmer.
So what's the fix? Well, he came up with this new ideal he called man thinking. And look, this isn't some stuffy scholar in an ivory tower. This is any person, you, me, anyone who refuses to be a parrot, who rejects secondhand thoughts and dares to think for themselves. The goal is to become a whole, self-reliant human being.
And what's really cool is how Emerson breaks this down. He gives us 3 pillars to shape this ideal thinker. First up, nature. For him, nature isn't just pretty scenery, it's like a direct line to universal truth. Second, books, the wisdom of the past. But, and this is a huge but, he warns us not to become bookworms. Books are for inspiration, not blind worship. And finally, number 3, action. You gotta live. You have to get out there and engage with the world, because as he puts it, without action, thought can never ripen into truth.
Okay, so Emerson gives us the blueprint, the theory for this ideal, independent person. But it's his friend, his protege, Henry David Thoreau, who takes that blueprint and really puts it to the test. Thoreau's basically asking, okay, this is great, but what happens when this self-reliant man thinking comes face-to-face with a government that's doing something deeply unjust?
So let's jump over to Thoreau, because this is where the idea gets put into action. He's writing in the 1840s, and at the time, the U.S. government supported slavery and was fighting the Mexican-American War, a war that he and a lot of other people saw as totally unjust, basically a land grab to expand slave territory. For Thoreau, this wasn't some abstract problem. This was a full-blown crisis of conscience.
And this leads to the absolute heart of the matter, a question Thoreau throws out there for every single one of us. Should we ever, even for a second, just hand over our moral compass to the government? His answer was a hard no. He believed our first duty, our real duty, is to do what we believe is right, not just what the law happens to say.
You see, Thoreau saw this incredible danger in just going along to get along. He argued that most people who serve the state, like soldiers, do it as machines, without any real moral thought. They become, in his really powerful words, mere wood and earth and stones, and they lose their humanity in the process. It's only a very, very few, the heroes, the martyrs, who serve the state with their conscience. And what happens to them? The state usually treats them like enemies.
All right, so if blindly following the law is wrong and the government is doing something unjust, then what are you supposed to do? This is where Thoreau shifts from just criticizing to laying out a real philosophy of action.
You know, Thoreau really had no time for people who just voted against something and then patted themselves on the back. He calls it a sort of gaming, like you're just placing a bet on what's right. For him, just casting a ballot and then waiting around for the majority to agree with you while a huge injustice is happening right now just wasn't a moral option. If you have a conscience, you have to act.
And this wasn't just some abstract theory for Thoreau. No way, he actually lived it. Right here in his essay, he says it himself. I have paid no poll tax for 6 years. I was put into a jail for 1 night. He refused to pay a tax that supported slavery and the war, and that small act of defiance, it landed him in jail. And that 1 night in jail became the spark for this entire world-changing essay.
That single night behind bars led him to this incredibly powerful, really radical conclusion. He says if the state is so unjust that it's locking up people who are doing the right thing, then the only honorable place for a just person is in that prison, right alongside them. I mean, think about that. It's a line so powerful it would echo for a century, inspiring people like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr.
Now, it's super easy to hear all this and think Thoreau was just an anarchist, right? That he wanted to burn it all down. But that's not it at all. His goal wasn't to get rid of government. His act of disobedience was about demanding a better government, a more just one.
He actually saw all of political history as this long journey, a progression from absolute monarchies to limited ones and then to democracy. But, and this is key, he didn't think democracy was the end of the line. She believed we could take one more giant step forward.
And this right here, this is his ultimate vision. A state that finally understands where its true power comes from. Not from majorities, not from tradition, but from the conscience of the individual. A state that treats every single person with respect as a kind of higher independent power. That was the more perfect state he was hoping for.
So when you put it all together, from Emerson's ideal of man thinking to Thoreau actually spending a night in jail for his beliefs, you're left with this really powerful legacy. They force us to ask ourselves, what is our ultimate duty? Is it to the law, or is it to our own conscience? It's the question they posed to America more than 150 years ago, and it is every bit as urgent and just as challenging today.